Wow, technology. Here we are again, J-Dog. What are we talking about today?
The silent presence of awareness. Chapter 7 of You Are the Happiness You Seek.
Okay. So is there anything in particular, after talking last week about the first 6 chapters? Yeah. Get that lady out of here.
Oh my God.
Dana's in the group. This is the first time we're going Instagram live with this conversation. So we've had to do a lot of figuring out of technology and fucking putting our hats on backwards to simultaneously match. But we are 2 dudes on the pathless path, I think is what we're calling ourselves. So the silent presence of awareness is chapter 7 that we're talking about today in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to reflect upon the first page?
I love the fact that he opens up with the whole first great recognition, which is, for me, did we talk about this last week? Maybe. Anyway, maybe we did. So step 1, understanding that we are the awareness that witnesses, knows, or is aware of our experience is the first great recognition. And
wait, you're in chapter 7 right now?
Yeah, what did you say?
Yeah, I did say 7, but I
felt like we talked about that one, didn't we?
Yeah, oh yeah, we did talk about 7. We did 7. Yeah, so my bad. We're on 8.
Fucking, you're a young whippersnapper. I mean, the elder here is fucking reminding you what's up.
We're definitely not going to be doing any editing either, so you can full on see our stupidity, mostly mine just now. So hopefully everyone enjoys that. We're on chapter 8.
All right, I hope so. Okay, so the title of the chapter, Tyler, is because you always use the opening. You do the opening and the quote in the beginning, so I'm going to defer to you.
Perfect. So chapter 8 is called The Open, Empty, Aware Space. And I usually do the quote if I actually like it. So I don't really like this one, so I'm not going to talk about it. But what I will begin to talk about is the first paragraph. The first paragraph refers to the question, is it enough to recognize oneself as the witnessing presence of awareness in the background of experience? And in the first paragraph, Rupert says, however, it is important to understand that the presence of awareness is not just the ever-present and unlimited background of experience, but also the medium or field in which it exists and into which it disappears when it vanishes. So essentially what this means is that awareness is not just this thing that is there. It's not even in itself a part of or a piece of the content of experience. Everything arises and falls away from the field of which is awareness. Awareness is the field in which everything arises and falls. So it's not just an experience that we're having. This table is a part of awareness. This air, this whatever, everything is within the field of awareness.
It's interesting you say that. I think Rupert. I think Rupert might disagree, but I'm not sure because I'm not sure of your words. So I'm going to share what I've heard him share in the past, which is, it's not that a human being has consciousness. It's not that a tree has consciousness. It is consciousness that is conscious, that, if you will, manifests or forms in a tree or a dog or a human being, but that the human being in and of itself is not conscious. So I was just picking up on your language on that.
So did I not say the same thing?
I don't know. I didn't detect that it was as such, but that's why I was saying, well, let me throw it out there, because if I don't know what your intentions were, or maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I think it's this chapter or one of the next ones. One sec, I'm gonna put headphones in here. I mean, that's what he is kind of saying. He's saying that everything is a part of awareness or consciousness. A lot of people in spiritual places will say consciousness, like everything is a part of consciousness or source, right? In a non-dual perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is his, what I believe in this book, first invitation to realize that everything is within that same field, which I thought it was notable that he ended up bringing that up in this book. So that was important.
Got it.
Anything to add on that? I mean, that could be talked about forever, because a lot of people might think that consciousness or awareness is just within our heads or it's just within our bodies. A lot of people might not say that there's consciousness in the cement beneath our feet, but based on a non-dual perspective of things, everything is within consciousness.
Yes. Sometimes they refer to it as the consciousness. All is every. Is it all, or consciousness all model? Meaning that everything comes from it, and getting into the whole. I'll pause. So yeah, I agree. Makes sense.
Cool. Glad you agree with me, because if you weren't going to agree with me, then I was probably going to hang up.
Well, considering that we've done this now for a couple of weeks, I would assume that you're a little more invested than that. So we'll see how it goes for the rest of this call.
Okay, so at the end of, I had something else start at the end of that first page there, page 65.
Say it.
I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. But essentially, I think in this chapter, what he's getting into is, and he does a really good job of this. We should probably talk about the example he offers about how everything arises within the vast space of awareness. Awareness in itself is a vast emptiness, which every piece of content of experience arises within. But he's inviting us throughout all the work that we've done, all the discussions that we've done, is to witness how everything, every piece of content or every content of experience is arising within this aware vast space. And in this section at the end of 65, what I liked that he said is, this is what he said: as such, the relationship between awareness and experience is much more intimate than that of an impartial witness to the object of experience. So what I believe he's saying here is that the content of experience is not a far off piece of awareness. It's delicately intertwined with awareness. There's not a separation there.
Yeah, I can dance. I appreciate that. It reminds me of, I don't know, for me, it's reminding me to say, you can be the witness of all of these things, but be careful of creating a duality by doing such, right? And that you're separate from your thoughts, which in part, I can appreciate is a step when we get lost in sometimes experience. But ultimately, he's always inviting us to realize that the complete fullness of experiencing of life is inclusive of what it means to be a witness and a participant of this dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even the witness and participant is not separate from it.
No, and I think, for those who, Tyler and I have been doing this for the last couple of weeks, what previous chapters he's emphasizing is this identification. When we identify ourselves with our body, when we identify ourselves with thoughts and sensations and perceptions, and assume that is our identity, our being is associated with our personality, that is the issue where we get lost in objective experiences, and we seek objective experiences to bypass or to circumvent us with our connection to our very essence or our nature. And so there is some caution and warning to say, be careful. It's important to become the witness of objective experience, knowing what your nature is. And that's step one, which I was starting to read in the beginning of our conversation. But step two is to go back into experience, knowing your nature and fully experience it. And knowing that too is as much you as the witnessing part of you witnessing things. So if you want to know more, you can go to Tyler's YouTube channel, check out our previous recordings. Plug alert.
We've literally never fucking plugged the YouTube either. In any of our conversations, we've not actually said, hey, go to the YouTube channel. Smart man. And we haven't posted, meaning I haven't posted last week. So that will be coming. And then this one will be coming next week. But thank you for that plug, Jason. And thank you for your offering.
Yeah.
I appreciate that perspective for sure. Is there anything after or within page 65, the first page of the chapter, that you'd like to address, or would you
negative Ghost Rider?
Okay. Anything on the next page that you'd like to dive into first?
Yeah, overall, I mean, I just made some comments, but there's nothing really that's sticking out like a sore thumb here today.
Okay. I did note the specific examples that he gave in 66. So in regards to the conversation he's having with the audience, somebody brings up the fact that they are witnessing their awareness through the confines of their body and their brain, right? And one of the passages right after that, he invites the audience to consider specific examples, which I thought was really playful and fun. So he says, can you even imagine an experience that could take place outside of awareness? Consider the extremes of experience: a near-death encounter, a vision of God, a drug-induced trip, a moment of ecstasy, intense pain. In this way that all experience takes place in the space of awareness, the only medium within which it is possible for any experience to occur. So the reason why I love this, I mean, aside from considering those things, there were good examples, right? A near-death experience, a drug-induced trip, which we're both familiar with. So what I imagined was, because I typically have a lot of anxiety and hard time, like with working with ayahuasca and in my experience of it, I imagined that even that experience, when I seem so out of my typical realization of reality, that is also happening within awareness itself. And I imagine as I was going through that experience, that if I were to remind myself of that, how held and how taken care of and safe I might feel as a result. And I just thought that was a fun, playful experiment. So the next time you're on mushrooms, kids, try to consider how, even though you're losing your mind, you are still within the same presence of awareness.
I like it, Tyler. You know, the other thing that what you just said reminds me, on the previous page when we were talking about, you know, how things come up in awareness, a thought, for example. And I think for me, he's super practical, which we've acknowledged, and experiential. So what I like is sometimes I'll just put it out here for our recording, is anyone can do that. So, you know, if you were to place yourself as a witness of your thoughts that are coming in and out of your head. I've done this exercise for myself, where you can't even anticipate or guess, or try to, I mean, experience it for yourself. Try to guess the next thought you're going to have. Try to predict it.
Fun.
And be a witness of it popping up, and then be curious, like, where the hell did that pop up from?
I've actually done that in a little bit of a different way, but yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and then you can see how thoughts arise, have some kind of short lifespan, if you will, and then they go. And there's no ability to control them going or staying, coming or going. And again, just to experientially dance with it for yourself to see, hey, does that resonate with me and my experiences? So I always thought that is
super fun.
Yeah.
I've challenged people a little bit too, like just asking them, like, where do you think these thoughts come from? Those things that arise in your head, where do you think that comes from? It's a good one to consider. for me at least, and playful, and hearing actually, if you want to play with people, audience, if you're listening, ask people, where do you think your thoughts come from, and just see the variation of a response is super interesting.
Yes.
All right, so we're moving along. Anything on page 67?
No. At some point, it'd be good to talk about concessions. He uses this term concessions of the mind, or making concessions when you perceive yourself to be a separate self. So, I don't know.
If you'd like to speak to that more, you're welcome to.
Yeah, so I guess is a good time, better than any other time. So there's a sentence he makes is,
oh yeah,
in fact, awareness is not a vast empty space having no form. It cannot be measured. It goes on. However, it is not possible to think of or imagine something with no dimensions. Indeed, something with no dimensions is not something. So a concession to the mind. And so this word concession, or phrase concession to the mind, is when we have a certain perspective, or we're looking at it through a specific lens of perspective. He says, let's give a concession to, if you're looking at it through this perspective, it enables to think about or imagine awareness. We add a like space quality, visualizing it as vast, empty field or space within which the entire content of experience appears. So ultimately, we make these different concessions to wrap our heads around the potential of this no dimensionless dimension. And so it just is too much of a leap to have no concept of time and space, right? I mean, that's why some people get disoriented when taking plant medicine. It's like, the ability to have time and space is negated. And so he's just using this phrase as a concession. Not that it's real, it's just a finger pointing to the moon, but let's acknowledge that it's a finger pointing to the moon, not that the finger is reality in and of itself, and as a concept.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I believe so. Anybody who thinks it's not helpful can comment and say not helpful.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I think we could speak a little bit more about the on page 68. There's a sentence that I enjoyed about him speaking about his experience, about the lens of which his body was the witness of awareness, and how it seems through most of us in our experiences, and what he talks about there, that awareness is solely witnessed through the experience of the body, the mind, and so on, whatever is within this capsule here. But then he starts to learn, or experience, I should say, that awareness, the noticing and feeling of awareness is not actually limited to the body. But something I noticed, and he begins to talk about this more on 69 too, but have you had an experience where you actually felt what we're talking about here, consciousness, awareness, outside of yourself?
Yeah, I've had a couple of them where I didn't feel like I was limited to my body at all. I actually just had one about 2 weeks ago in the gym. It was really interesting. Actually, it was after breath work, my first breath work session. It was like a 75 or 90-minute breath work session. So about 2 hours later, I go to the gym and work out. And I was listening to some music and what have you. And there was, someone talking to, music in the background. And I looked up, and it was really weird. I saw everyone in the gym, including myself. Although this is gonna be like trying to talk about this when you're on plant medicine.
Yeah. Explain the unexplainable, please.
But it was really fascinating to know that the bodies that were walking around and working out in the gym were almost like puppets, and that I and everyone behind the bodies were infused with this unicity, this unifying, whatever you want to call it, a unifying field, unify, let's say consciousness, right? And so it felt very, like I was very intimately connected beyond the body, and everyone was, not everyone, but consciousness was just one flow. And what was interesting is that I had this analogy of everyone's brain and body was just a unique filtering system of the one consciousness. And it was really psychedelic, really cool to experience. And it was almost like, although everyone was doing their own exercises, it was almost like a concert. Like there was just this seemed to be a symbiotic dance.
Yeah.
Of everyone doing their thing independently, but yet no one doing anything without the whole flowing. It was just so fascinating, so cool.
Super cool. Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's interesting to me about that too is, you know, and this is all about the pathless path. Like that had nothing to do. You said it was after a breathwork session.
After breathwork session.
But you had then gone and started to train.
Yeah, a couple hours, like 2 hours later, I went and I worked out.
Okay, so like you had no intention of this happening, right? Like you weren't sitting there in meditation. You had not taken any plant medicines. And I guess the point that I'm getting to is, are we deciding to allow awareness, or are we deciding to allow ourselves to be unveiled by what prevents us from experiencing awareness? Or is awareness deciding that it shall shine through us now and show us now? Who has the choice? Do we actually have that choice? Because in that experience, it came through you. You noticed it in that moment, but you didn't decide that you were going to notice it in that moment. You weren't working to notice it in that moment. It had just appeared in there.
Yeah, well, I would say, but based on what we've read, there was no chooser, and there was no separate person choosing to have that experience, right?
Well, yeah, but so think of yourself as a separate self for a moment. I know you have it figured out. Most of us are deciding that we want to see or choose to allow ourselves to witness that, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that even, you know, from this dualistic perspective, you can't work towards that, which we've brushed across before.
Yeah, it's not something that you, it's not like you, a separate doer, is going to create that phenomenon.
Yeah. Okay. In regards to this kind of experience as well, something that I noted that Rupert in his experience described is that it was both exhilarating and frightening. And I noted the frightening part because a lot of people in their quest for enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, think it's all peaches and cream all the time. And David Hawkins talks about his experience of going into whatever you want to call it, his higher levels of consciousness. It's not always comfortable. In fact, I would say it could be very uncomfortable. For me, and a reason why I think I carry fear into plant medicines, and I've noticed this in certain other important experiences, meditations, float tanks and stuff, when you get really close to the edge of your unveiling, there's going to be something that wants to prevent you from letting go of those things. Call it the ego, call it whatever you want, but it could be a little bit frightening. It could be confusing. It could be physically uncomfortable as well. I've heard a lot about physical sensations through David Hawkins' experience of that. But yeah, my invitation is just not think that it's going to be peaches and cream as you allow yourself to melt into awareness.
If you use the peaches and cream metaphor, have you heard the song "Millions of Peaches"?
Nope.
Why don't you sing it for us?
I wish I knew it, but you seem to know it, so go ahead.
Now I'm gonna send you the YouTube clip. Millions of peaches, peaches for free. I know I'm not a really good singer, so I'll just stop there. I think it's Weezer. I think it's Weezer who sings it.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I've never gotten kudos on my singing abilities in my life.
Maybe next week we could plan a little bit of a performance for our 3 viewers.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I don't have anything else in wrapping up chapter 8. You want to move on to chapter 9?
Let me just double check.
Yeah, double check away. Just be here looking at my Instagram live audience.
You know, he says this reminder on page 68 in the middle. It says, awareness is turning its attention upon itself. Some of this probably is going to get lost in context for those who are trying to follow the 3 people that you referenced. But the paragraph it says there in the middle of 68, until then, I had believed and felt that awareness was located somewhere behind my eyes, looking out at the world. I mean, that to me is typical human experience, right? That we would attribute. But now I was experiencing the body and the world within myself. It was obvious that awareness perceived the world through the body, but I had mistakenly presumed that this implied that it was located in and limited to the body. And I think going back to my gym example, to me, the visceral experience is that consciousness is not limited, so to speak, to just being behind the eyes or in the localized body, and that we're all these independent entities. For me, my gym experience really highlighted this, where there's one consciousness, like there's one movie screen, and the different characters on the movie screen that get modulated appear to be separate, but ultimately, you're right, that analogy that it's still and always is just the screen. So for me, the brain and the body are just, and personality, so to speak, are all just filters for how consciousness, the screen, shows up in a localized perspective. But that at the root of it, the body and the eyes don't contain consciousness. I don't know. I just thought that was a really, if people can dance with that and sit with that in and of itself, it would probably, I'm sure there's tons of questions and hell knows maybe, but that is a game changer, at least it was for me.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually highlighted that, the bottom of that paragraph as well. That's part, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to even get close to explain that I have this figured out, but it is interesting to, play with these things again. Like, how could you notice what awareness or consciousness is through your foot or through whatever part of your body? Just play with things like that is fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So chapter 9 is called Peace and Happiness is Our Nature. And
you like this quote, Tyler?
I think I like this quote. I think I'll share this quote.
All right, we'll fucking let it rip.
I didn't highlight it, but I think I like it enough. The quote exclaims, "I have seen what you want. It is there. A beloved of infinite tenderness." By Catherine of Siena.
So why did you decide to read it? What was the poke to share it to? Because you didn't share chapter 8's quote.
Why this one? Probably just because you pressured me. That's probably it. Just because I haven't read a quote today.
I appreciate the power.
Like it's not that it's not a good quote. It's just like I wouldn't say it's I don't know.
Well, my experience of you in previous weeks, there were some quotes that you really liked. So it was clear that you were coming out the gate with your guns drawn, and I'm fucking reading this quote and I love it. And you explained it. So,
Gotcha. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't just end my Instagram live. Okay, there we go.
No, you didn't. I can still see your face.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I got distracted there for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was making sure that the live didn't stop. I think just the combined words of infinite tenderness as your description to awareness or consciousness is just kind of nice and gentle, and I appreciate that.
It speaks to me to say, you really, there's an infinite tenderness in Tyler's heart, and therefore he connects with that pretty well.
I see something about myself in infinite tenderness.
Yeah, you're such a softie.
I'm such a number 2, not number 2 like poo, but like a type 2, guys. Type 2 Enneagram.
Yeah.
I have nothing on that first page, but I have plenty on the second of that chapter.
I do think it's in the second paragraph there. And just as the space of a room is not made peaceful by modifying the behavior of the people inside it, but is inherently at peace before, during, and after various activities. So our essential nature of pure awareness is always at peace, irrespective of the content of experience. It does not need to be purified, improved, or stilled. And that's a doozy to wrap your head around and consider that one, that's for sure. But I just throwing it out there. What does that mean for you, Tyler, as I was reading that?
I honestly totally missed what you said. What chapter?
What fucking chapter we're on?
No, not chapter. I'm sorry, what paragraph on that first page?
The second paragraph.
Ashley texted me and she was saying that something was going on with the headphones. So, second paragraph. Oh yeah. So just as the space of the room is not made peaceful by modifying the behavior of people inside it, but is inherently at peace before. It's always at peace. I appreciate the example because this could be applied, I think, really practically for people that have social anxiety or issues with groups of people or are just sensitive to people in general. If you recognize, what awareness is as this empty and peaceful space, and you walk into any area yourself, realizing that you are that, and that also that space is that, you carry your essence, the room is that essence, and even the essence of all those other people are there as well, and you recognize all of this simultaneously. It could, in my experience, what I think if I apply this is that I would be able to not attach or get sucked into the content or drama of that experience. So I like that example for that reason, just the practical way to be applied.
Cool.
What do you think?
I think the metaphor is helpful and challenging to consider that regardless of what we are experiencing, our fundamental nature never is seized or captured by that. And it challenges me at times when I realize that there are situations in which the activity in a room, i.e. my agitation about how something is showing up or someone's presence or how I'm experiencing someone's presence, or what have you.
Yeah.
And how I can at times quickly go back to my conditioned patterns where the experience almost dictates whether the room or my nature is influencing me in such a way that I lose touch with my fundamental nature that he outlines in the book. So I was pondering it as a relationship to like anything else. I set with an inventory and say, okay, what content, what furniture, if I placed in a room, what I find myself saying, being agitated about, whether it's a piece of furniture, a person,
Yeah.
or what have you. So it was an interesting exercise to try to explore that through what he's trying to share. So
yeah, it's fun to play with, especially for me. Like, obviously it is a metaphor, but like, I'm here at my family's house and there's a lot of people that show me things about myself that make that I end up feeling certain things about. So like, if you're with family or with friends or whatever, and you want to play a game of like, oh, this is the agitation arising within my awareness, and it arises in the form of this uncle or whatever. It's a little, again, fun game to play with. And noticing when they leave the room, is that something going on within you, your agitation leaving you? Does that agitation need to be there? Can you perceive that trigger or person as something other than that agitation, the content of experience, and so on?
amen.
So let's move on to the second page if we haven't already. Anything near the top or that page that stands out in your experience?
I'll just read it because I think it piggybacks on what I just read on the previous page. Right underneath where it says happiness is the nature of awareness. So just as the empty space of a room does not stand to gain or lose anything from whatever takes place within it, likewise, we awareness are not enhanced or diminished by any experience, however pleasant or unpleasant it might be. Awareness is always the same pristine condition. And I think at the end of the day, and feel like what's important is when we identify and have a true knowing in our understanding and our sensations or our experience in the body and how we perceive the world, if that is aligned with the knowing of our essential nature, equanimity, which we've talked about in the past, there's no longer a sense of agitation or no longer a sense of separateness, and there's no longer a sense of lack, right? So minus that, if we know that, then when you have various experiences, they are experienced through that lens and that knowing. I have had my own experiences of why that feels very true for me, that it could be a shit show in this room, but how I'm experiencing and understanding it doesn't ruffle my feathers, in the sense of me being, I'll just use some traditional language, like dysfunctionally expressive of my reactivity to those events, rather than, when we identify with our personality or we identify our identity with thoughts and emotions, that to me is when the room becomes a clusterfuck and our experience becomes a clusterfuck. And then what he's saying doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if we're so identified with our personality and our body and our mind and etc., objective experience, I think anyone from that perspective would look at this, what we just read, and said that's some really spiritual, fancy woo-woo bullshit, but I simply cannot relate to it. So I think it's the tale of two identifications. Do you identify with objective experience? You're going to reject that idea. If you identify with your fundamental nature of what you are, that would seem to make quite a bit of sense, is what I would propose.
Thank you for sharing that, my friend.
Yeah.
So we have a few more minutes. I don't want to rush us through the chapters. It's really not that many more pages, but at the bottom of 72, at the top of 73, there was something that stood out to me.
Yeah.
He says that happiness is not a temporary state of mind or even an emotion in the ordinary sense of the word. It is the ever-present background of all changing states and emotions. That's what he's saying, right? Happiness is the awareness, the presence of awareness. It is consciousness. It is our natural beingness.
But
And
not
then
to be, not, I apologize, sorry, but not to be to the point though, not to be mistaken for our classical word that we use for
yeah.
happiness.
It is, and that's his next sentence. It is the nature of ourself. As such, we cannot know happiness as an objective experience, meaning we can't know it as an emotion, right? Like that's not what we know it as. We can only be it. Likewise, we cannot be unhappy. We can only know it. It's the inverse, because as happiness is our natural nature, our natural presence, the unhappiness or the experience of it is something that we know because it is arising within our natural state of happiness. Unhappiness is content and drama of experience. It is not the same. It is not on the same spectrum, is how I'm interpreting that.
Yeah.
It's not a gradient based on what he's describing happiness as.
Yeah, we can't be fundamentally unhappy. We can only perceive something as an objective experience as being, right, unhappy, or what is perceived as unhappy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting, I highlighted it as well. I mean, at the end of the day, when we forget our essence or our nature, we have a sense of separation, lack, and agitation. Those, when we identify with a separate self or our ego, that is what introduces the perception that I'm unhappy, I have anxiety, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, whatever the misery or the suffering that we're experiencing psychologically. And so to me, that is really coming back to your essence, because you've been so lost in objective experience. So therefore, that to me is what he's saying, is that when we identify with that separate self or our ego, that is what introduces the knowing of unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we come back to our nature to really explore our fundamental nature, then that's, in knowing that that's what our nature is, then we can only be that, you know, in a sense of what we are. So the veiling, we just recognize our nature, and then therefore, in a practical sense, over time, the misery and the unhappiness ceases to operate in one's life.
Yeah.
Because of that transition from identifying from that limited perspective to our essential nature.
Yeah, I got you there. All right, well, there's definitely a couple more things at the end of that chapter that I would have liked to talk about, but we have to wrap it up here because it's all my fault. I have to run to a client session here in a second. Do you want to come back next week and finish off this chapter?
Yes, sir. What page? Let me just double check. I started moving away.
We finished on 70. The last thing that I shared was the top 73.
Yeah. All right. So let's start at 73 tomorrow. Oh, not tomorrow. Next week.
Yeah. So we'll go from 73, hop into chapter 10 next week. Chapter 11. We'll hope to get through those two chapters. We'll have the technology figured out, Instagram Live and whatnot, so we won't be delayed.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, my friend. I'll see you very soon. Hugs and kisses. Two dudes on the pathless path. Thanks for joining today on Instagram Live.